Minato Namikaze and Itachi Uchiha. Perhaps the two most polarizing characters from the Leaf Village when it comes to power scaling, as well as the arguably two most talented shinobi to ever come from the village. Unsurprisingly, this matchup has sparked heated debates among fans for more than 2 decades now. In this video, I'll dive deep into this battle and explore why the fight might be closer than you think. For this video, I'll be using Hokage Minato and leaving Itachi. I'll be talking about the alternative versions at the end of the video if you're interested in that. So without further ado, let's get started. Itachi and Minato are both portrayed as exceptional prodigies by various sources, though given what we know about their childhoods, you could say that compared to Itachi, Minato was kind of a late bloomer. Itachi graduated from the Ninja Academy at the age of 7, and Danzo, who is also familiar with Minato, considered Itachi the greatest genius the academy ever had. 2 years before Itachi even graduates, he saves a Jonin by using his chakra-reinforced fist to crush a huge boulder that was going to hit the Jonin. That's literally a 5-year-old baby Itachi using some pseudo-chakra-enhanced strength, the technique that Sakura and Tsunade use. It's kinda wild. Later on, during the Chunin exams, Itachi clears the Forest of Death solo, and he does so faster than Minato does with his team, despite being 3 years younger than Minato and Minato's teammates. On the other hand, Minato graduated at the age of 10 and holds the highest score ever recorded for the first part of the Chunin exams, the written test. Though it's important to note that Itachi came second despite being much younger than Minato when he took the test. Now, we don't really know much about Minato's childhood besides that, since he doesn't have a novel about his childhood. But at age 12, Minato saves Kushina from Cloud Ninjas, which is no small feat. According to Minato's birthday column, this act made his name known worldwide, suggesting that these Cloud Ninjas were highly skilled. For reference, at 12 years old, Itachi was already considered to be strong enough to single-handedly take down the entire Uchiha clan by Danzo, and although it would be through an ambush, it's still pretty crazy to imagine that. So, based on their early achievements, Itachi appears to have been far ahead in both academic and combat-related feats. However, once Minato grows older, the balance shifts. As a Jonin, Minato became so feared that there was a flee-on-site order put up for him, and he's also credited with winning the war for the Leaf Village. While there are no direct comparisons between Minato and Itachi in the manga, some parallels can be drawn. Both stand above the Sannin. Minato was stated to be able to stop Orochimaru, while Itachi pretty much gave the guy PTSD. They're also both capable of stopping the Nine Tails, and each one of them is portrayed as an unparalleled genius by pretty strong shinobi. Minato by both his friends and foes, and Itachi by Kabuto and Obito. Another way of comparing these two could be through Naruto and Sasuke, as both Minato and Itachi are used as benchmarks for the two main characters throughout the manga. But while it's pretty clear how does Sasuke stack up to Itachi, as the first time we really get that confirmation is in Databook 4, which says that Sasuke only caught up to Itachi once he awakened his EMS pretty much. With Naruto and Minato, it's a lot more complicated. Minato's power level most likely got retconned throughout the manga, and more than once at that. In part 1 of the Naruto manga, Minato is sometimes treated as if he was the strongest Hokage, which clearly isn't the case by part 2. But even in part 2, Minato's power level isn't exactly consistent. Fukasaku thinks that Sage Mode Naruto might have surpassed Minato, and Killer Bee outright believes MS Sasuke might be the strongest enemy he's ever faced. Keep in mind that Killer Bee has fought against Minato in the past, and the MS Sasuke that he faces off against and calls possibly the strongest enemy didn't even have Susanoo. I mean, this Sasuke only had awakened Amaterasu during the fight, and he also basically got killed 3 times by Bee. Now, some people try to make sense out of these statements by just trying to weasel their way around the logic. For example, claiming that Fukasaku must have meant that Naruto surpassed Minato only in sagehood, but since we didn't even know Minato is a sage at this point and we don't really find out until way later, that doesn't really make sense, and I don't think it's really a plausible explanation. So I'ma just call it a retcon, especially since Killer Bee appears to have PTSD just 1 arc later at the mention of Minato's name, and 4th Raikage who not only has faced Minato in the past but also a Sasuke stronger than the one B faced, still thinks that Minato is goated. So yeah, I'm not really sure how I could be convinced otherwise. Anyways, since Sage Mode Naruto surpassing Minato isn't what we are going with, it means that Minato's ceiling isn't really clear, and neither Minato nor Itachi have any meaningful edge over each other in hype, hence why we need to dive into their feats and abilities. First of all, it's important to establish what do they know about each other, as that kinda determines how they would fight. And both Itachi and Minato being incredibly intelligent fighters, the way they can capitalize on their knowledge can't be overemphasized. Minato died before Itachi really made a name for himself, so he's going into this fight quite blind. The best one can argue here is that Minato will recognize that Itachi is an Uchiha, whether by discerning it from Itachi's chakra signature or by noticing the Sharingan. Once Minato knows that fact, he can actually unpack a lot more from it. He seems to have decent amount of knowledge on Uchihas, seeing how he could deduce Obito's limits of genjutsu control over the Nine Tails. So the basic stuff like avoiding the eye contact, which even ninjas from foreign lands know, should be given. However, that's pretty much it, and Minato will be in the dark about Itachi's other abilities, from Mangekyo Sharingan abilities to Itachi's more unique genjutsu abilities such as casting it through crows or fingers, or his habit of using clones. Itachi actually won't be in a much better position, although he comes from a younger generation. Anbu of each village do their absolute best to keep information about their dead shinobi under the lid. The idea of the information about Minato's arsenal just floating out in the open and being taught for no reason whatsoever is just far-fetched. So the extent of Itachi's intel on Minato will probably amount to just knowing that Minato was called a Yellow Flash, he was quick, he sealed the Nine Tails, and maybe also that Minato invented the Rasengan. I don't think you can make a reasonable case for more than that. And honestly, even if I granted Itachi that he knows about Hiraishin, or Flying Thunder God technique if you will, it still wouldn't really need to be impactful, since even Minato's own student, Obito, misunderstood key aspects of the technique which costed him the fight. So in some ways it might actually backfire by making Itachi overconfident and more vulnerable to Minato doing something that Itachi doesn't know nor expect. Speed is going to be a huge factor in this fight, so it's better to get it out of the way right now. Itachi has consistently kept up with Kage level speedsters. From trading hands with KCM Naruto to clashing with Sage Mode Kabuto, it's clear he's at least somewhere above the V1 Raikage ballpark in physical speed. Minato's physical speed is actually harder to pin down since he relies so much on his Hiraishin. There's only few movement speed feats he has, but when it comes to his reactions, at least those have been pretty clearly established both in the manga and databook. Minato's reaction speed is on par with Raikage's reactions. Keep in mind that this is 4th Raikage who isn't using his lightning cloak. When Minato is using his Hiraishin to supplement his speed, he becomes practically untouchable for V2 4th Raikage. He can even land attacks on Teen Obito before Obito can react and activate his Kamui intangibility. There's also the feat of Minato reacting to 8 Gates Guy's fastest Sekizo step, which was pressuring even Jubi Jinchuriki Madara with how fast it was. But since even his KCM version struggled to keep up with Jubi Jinchuriki Obito's speed, I find it hard to believe it's not just an outlier.
Well, actually, that the book says Minato was in a daze, so he was mentally nerfed, and that doesn't really count.
Yeah, I know about that one too. However, Databook only references the scene where Minato is getting trash talked by Obito, and extrapolating it on what happens chapters before that and chapters later, as well as assuming that he's dazed to the point where he performs worse in KCM than he would in base, it just seems like a huge reach that I'm not willing to make here. If he at least was able to teleport away from Jubi Jinchuriki's Madara attack in time while in Sage mode, I would maybe think about granting him that, but as it is now, I think there's more that points towards Minato's just not being able to react to those speeds rather than the opposite. There are also some forced comparisons between Minato and Itachi that I have seen over the years, as they have faced the same opponent, which allows people to make these. When Minato fought Raikage and B actually manages to intercept Minato's attack with his tentacle. He also manages to put a knife behind his back, which people sometimes misinterpret as B reacting to Minato's Hiraishin speed. Then we have Itachi putting up pressure on an older B and even notifying B in advance so B can react to his attacks. First of all, B never reacts to Hiraishin. Minato literally just teleports behind B and doesn't even attack, so there was nothing to react to. It's far more likely that it's just a prediction on B's part. It's also unclear when does B send his tentacle to aid 4th Raikage. So it's not really a clean interception feat regardless, as B might have already sent it there the moment he realizes what Minato is planning to do. When it comes to Itachi's feats against B, it actually seems like B was pressuring Itachi at some points as he forces Itachi to retreat momentarily. And as for Itachi blitzing Killer B, it's more likely that B just had his line of sight blocked. First, by the fireball that Itachi casts, and secondly, from the boulder that Nagato pulls out from the lake. Now, an important thing to mention here is that Itachi owes his reaction speed mostly to his Sharingan, which gives him precognition. How great are Itachi's reactions without that precognition is something we don't really know. And the reason why this will play a role in this fight is because if Minato teleports and attacks from the back or anywhere out of Itachi's line of sight, then that precognition ability is something that Itachi can no longer depend on. And for all intents and purposes, Minato is attacking base Itachi without his Sharingan, whose reactions are practically featless. So yeah, good luck making an argument for Itachi there. Anyways, the fact that Minato only has reflexes on par with base Raikage as covered above, yet he can still finesse the hell out of V2 Raikage regardless, should tell you all you need to know about how much Hiraishin helps in Minato's attacks. Even if one argues Itachi is comparable to Minato in physical speed, which I actually do think is a reasonable take, or if one even believes that Itachi is outright superior and faster than Minato, that still doesn't matter, as even V2 Lightning Cloak cannot make up for the gap that Hiraishin creates. So overall, Minato with Hiraishin has the clear advantage here. Itachi's fighting style revolves around finding weaknesses in his opponents and their techniques. While it's true that every technique has a weakness, it's not true that every character can capitalize on every technique's weakness. For instance, Itachi needed B and Naruto helping him in order to capitalize on Planetary's Devastation's weakness. The reason why this is important is because Hiraishin is another technique which weakness Itachi can't really capitalize on by himself. The easiest way to counter Hiraishin is either to be faster than the user or to attack the user and all his markings at once, which prevents him from dodging anywhere. However, Itachi doesn't have enough speed to blitz Minato, nor does he have a technique with large enough AoE to engulf the entire battlefield at once. Now, what's worse for Itachi is that there are actually some devious ways Hiraishin can be employed, one of them being Hiraishin's linking mechanic. Minato can teleport anything he or his chakra are touching. Note that the contact can also be indirect. We've also seen this with Minato teleporting himself and Kurama despite Gamabunta being in between them, for example. What this allows Minato to do in this matchup is to merely touch a technique of Itachi, which is simultaneously touching Itachi, and he can just teleport Itachi himself now. Now, this mechanic is actually pretty deadly in certain scenarios. Itachi could find himself suddenly being teleported to a marking where Minato's clone is already waiting with a Rasengan. Now, there are obviously some limits to this linking mechanic, as if taken too far and too literally, you could even argue that Minato can teleport literally anything and anyone, as long as there is something that they're both touching, such as the ground they're walking on or the air, which clearly isn't the case, as Minato struggles, warping people that he's sharing the ground or air with at some points in the story. However, this example with Susanoo isn't really different from how we've seen this mechanic used in the manga. Itachi therefore won't be able to relax even when he's using Susanoo, which makes Hiraishin pretty much more useful than it is in a lot of matchups. Normally this section wouldn't really be a thing, but since such a large chunk of Minato's fighting style rests on placing his kunais around the battlefield, as well as landing them close to his enemy, it's actually pretty important to go over, as Itachi is probably the best Shurikenjutsu user in the verse, so at first glance it might appear as if Itachi counters Minato's fighting style pretty hard. Minato usually starts his fights by dispersing a large amount of kunai in multiple directions, allowing him to move instantly around the battlefield at any point should the need for it arise. Minato is even capable of throwing dozens of kunais at once, which I don't think we've ever seen anyone doing, not even Itachi. Now, even if we assume that Itachi can match all of them in time by throwing multiple sets of kunai or shuriken quickly one after another, all he does is just force the Hiraishin kunai to drop to the ground sooner than Minato originally intended. Those kunais will still be useful regardless, as Itachi doesn't have any techniques with huge AoE that would envelop the entire battlefield anyways, so even kunais that are dropped close by will come in handy, especially since the formula that's sitting on top of these kunais is indestructible, so even if they're being hit by the techniques that are being thrown around during the fight, it won't actually impact Minato's ability to move around the battlefield. Now, this is all assuming that Itachi even bothers stopping kunai that 1. Aren't even flying his way, pose no threat to him, and second, that he doesn't even know what their role is, since at the start of the fight he won't be even aware of how Hiraishin works. So there's actually a pretty high chance that Itachi just doesn't do anything and lets Minato place his markings. But I went over both options just in case. Now, secondly, if Minato throws kunai right at Itachi, Itachi can just naturally stop it with a kunai or a shuriken of his own. However, this doesn't prevent Minato's kunais from ricocheting and landing near Itachi, allowing Minato to land a Hiraishin level 2 blitz anyways. We have seen multiple shurikens landing near Itachi's feet during his Shurikenjutsu battle with Sasuke, and kunai interactions seem to actually work the same way in this verse. Okay, technically this is not a kunai, but there's no rotation, so I just used it. But man, seriously, like, how heavy is that toothpick? And he's chewing on it all day. Bro has actual Kage level jaw strength. Anyways, now couple that with the fact that Minato's kunai are apparently heavier than your usual kunai knife, and it becomes more likely that Minato's kunai lands uncomfortably close to Itachi, which gives Minato the opportunity which he can immediately capitalize on. Just before we go to the next section, keep in mind that Minato can use clones, obviously, and all those clones have their own kunai, and he can even create multiple clones, and if Itachi tries to match them with clones of his own, Minato is likely ending up making more clones in the end, as Minato has some great chakra volume hype as he is a sage. The interesting thing about Minato's clones is that they essentially function like mobile Hiraishin formulas, as they can summon the original Minato to them. So at any point, if Minato's clone manages to get close to Itachi, the original can just teleport to the clone and surprise attack Itachi. Now imagine multiple Minato clones just tossing kunais at Itachi and trying to get close to him, and it kinda starts looking bleak for Itachi, who has to make sure no kunai or clone ever gets close to him, as that's almost a game over for him. At first glance, due to Minato's speed advantage thanks to Hiraishin, which I have covered, it might seem that Itachi engaging in melee combat is a death sentence for him. I mean, if at any point Minato's hand touches Itachi, whether it's during a head-to-head clash or just a mere block, Itachi gets marked with a Hiraishin formula, allowing Minato to warp onto Itachi from literally anywhere at any point, which spells, basically death for Itachi here. Minato can also just manifest Rasengan and overpower anything Itachi puts up against it, outside of Susanoo, assuming Itachi's got enough time for it. And ironically, Itachi engaging in melee combat is actually quite likely to happen, as he has shown to be likely to engage in it regardless of who he faces, from Kurenai to Kakashi, Sasuke, KCM Naruto, and even Sage Kabuto. Now listen, if you thought I was heavily favoring Minato until now, this is where things begin to change. There are 4 things that can actually sway things in Itachi's favor in melee combat: clones, genjutsu, Mangekyo Sharingan techniques, and crows. Since the first 3 will be covered later, let's just focus on the crows for now, as some of you might be thinking I'm actually trolling, but I'm actually completely serious. Crows are honestly a pretty underrated part of Itachi's arsenal. Crows flying around someone is a powerful distraction. First time we've seen this being used was actually by someone other than Itachi. Aoba used crows as an obfuscation against Kakuzu and Hidan. Kakuzu at first mocks it, but it actually proves to be effective, as Raido, who's not even a fully fledged Jonin but only a Tokubetsu Jonin, actually gets right into Kakuzu's face and even manages to land an attack. Now imagine if it was Kakuzu's spear, some Kage level shinobi who was capitalizing on this opportunity, and you can see why I think this strategy is pretty dangerous. Using crows this way can't even be argued to be out of character for Itachi, as we have seen him using crows like this before. While against Sage Mode Kabuto it didn't allow Itachi to land a clean hit, the crows actually still proved to be useful regardless, as they disarmed Kabuto. This is honestly pretty overlooked feat, given just how impressive strength and reaction speed of Sages is. Itachi releasing a flock of crows at EMS Sasuke even allowed Itachi to stall Sasuke long enough to basically completely lose him and get to Kabuto's cave first by his own, although originally Sasuke was right behind him and Itachi didn't have much of a lead. Therefore, if Itachi just has his crows surrounding him and moves them around to block Minato's line of sight as needed, or even has them messing with Minato's kunai markings for example, it might actually give Itachi an opening that he would have otherwise never gotten in melee combat. There's of course also the possibility of catching Minato in Genjutsu through the Sharingan wielding crow. That's always on the table and I will go into more detail on it later. Now, while I did just say that Itachi has the habit of engaging in melee combat, he sometimes sends his clones to do so instead. Itachi is one of the best clone feint users in the verse, as he even managed to clone feint the likes of Sage Mode Kabuto. While Minato, even during his Jonin days, was capable of differentiating shadow clones from the original, if Itachi can clone feint even a sage, and sages are some of the best sensors there are, then I'm not so sure if it's really going to be impossible to trick Minato. In order to even be sensing, you need to enter a so-called sensory mode, and it seems like there are some serious drawbacks to maintaining this sensory mode during battle, as C points out to Darui in this page. We've seen Minato not having his sensory mode activated during the war, so we know it applies to him as well, and he won't be constantly sensing his surroundings mid-battle. So Minato being caught off guard by a clone, despite being a sensor, isn't really that hard to believe for those reasons. Now the good news is, even if Minato gets clone feinted, it shouldn't have drastic consequences, at least most of the times. Minato can still teleport away at speeds where Itachi will have a hard time landing an attack before Minato is gone. And even if the clone is an exploding one, part 1 Kakashi seems to have either partially dodged it or just tanked it while carrying Kurenai, so Minato can just easily dodge that as well. All in all, Itachi's clone game here really shouldn't be as impactful as it usually would be, though there is always some lingering chance of a clone fate working at least as a distraction long enough for Itachi to land an attack, so it has to be mentioned. Itachi's bread and butter. Surprisingly, I don't think you can really make that many good arguments for Minato here, and it's definitely the weakest part of the argument for Minato winning. Just to quickly sum up what I said previously, which will still be relevant here. Minato should recognize that Itachi is an Uchiha and avoid eye contact because of it. You might argue that he seems to be looking into Obito's mask when he fights him, but there's two reasons why that doesn't really work as a counterpoint here. First, Minato might have speculated that Obito can't use Genjutsu while controlling Kurama, which isn't really as far-fetched since, controlling Kurama took such toll on Obito. And second, maybe Minato actually couldn't see Obito's eyes even when looking at his mask, which is actually supported by Itachi Capture Squad not realizing that Tobi had Sharingan until the very end, despite looking straight at him at multiple points of the fight. It does seem like Obito's masks hide his eyes pretty well, and you can't see his eyes unless you're looking at his mask from a specific angle. So in conclusion, there really is just no proof that Minato is, going to be looking straight into Uchiha's eyes in regular scenario. Another thing I mentioned were the drawbacks of sensory mode, which is also relevant here. As said before, Minato won't always be in sensory mode, which also means that he won't be able to tell when Itachi is casting Genjutsu. Sensors can also generally tell when they themselves are in Genjutsu. So with sensory mode not being constantly used, that advantage is gone too. The only scenario when I can see Minato realizing he's in Genjutsu is when he already has doubts whether what he's seeing is real. So he goes into sensory mode, sees his chakra is being controlled or whatever, and then he can, finally conclude that he's in Genjutsu. However, interestingly enough, Itachi's control over his targets seems to be so perfect that even an entire sensing platoon is unable to spot who's being controlled by Itachi. So Minato's sensing might have actually been useless here regardless of where he's actively sensing or not. A subtle enough illusion that doesn't warp the reality too much, just like the one that Sasuke used on Danzo, for example, and Minato most likely won't even realize he's in Genjutsu. So as it stands, Minato's priority is to avoid being caught in Genjutsu no matter what it takes, as otherwise he most likely just loses. And luckily for him, Minato focusing on avoiding eye contact here seems quite likely, because he should know that he can't break out of Sharingan Genjutsu. Sharingan Genjutsu is pretty consistently treated like a game over in both the manga and databook. From Chiyo's comments to databook 3 entry, it really seems like the only way to deal with it is through partner method or having a mastered Sharingan. The regular methods of having good enough chakra control and using release technique, or Genjutsu Kai if you will, is explicitly stated to not be enough against Sharingan Genjutsu. To give a full picture, there are few examples where Sharingan Genjutsu was countered, but it was always through some specific methods unique to the characters, such as Orochimaru sliding past the illusory stakes while he's inside his reincarnation dimension, so kinda unclear whether he can do it in the real world too, and also Deidara's trained eye. Safe to say Minato hasn't shown anything like that, so Sharingan Genjutsu should be good enough granted that it lands, and Itachi doesn't even need to use Tsukuyomi. However, making eye contact will actually be pretty difficult against someone who likes to move around so much and attack from blind sides. And that's where Itachi's other Genjutsu capturing methods come to play. He's got his Sharingan wielding crow and he's also got his finger. Now the crow is actually pretty difficult to predict. If Itachi just sends a flock of crows at Minato like I talk about in the melee combat section, there's really nothing stopping Minato from accidentally looking into the Sharingan of that crow. Then there's finger Genjutsu. It actually has pretty whack feats. I mean, it caught Naruto, who was pretty damn weak at that point, and we see that Itachi didn't even bother using it on Kakashi and instead knew he has to use his Sharingan Genjutsu on him. So there is some reason to believe that it's a pretty weak Genjutsu technique and Minato would just break out of it effortlessly. The fact that Itachi doesn't really use this on any strong opponent doesn't help his case either, so I do think the Crow Genjutsu is mainly what Minato has to worry about here. Now, while the Crow Genjutsu strategy might seem unbeatable, it's important to keep in mind that another Genjutsu counter method that Minato has access to are Shadow Clones. Shadow Clones are a tested and proven anti-Genjutsu strategy which already worked against Itachi's Sharingan Genjutsu once before. The clone strategy does two things for Minato. First, if a clone gets caught in Genjutsu, it won't work and Itachi has just wasted chakra on nothing. And second, if somehow the original Minato gets caught in Genjutsu, the clone can just teleport it to safety and break the Genjutsu through the partner method. If Minato relies on both the clone strategy as well as avoiding eye contact, the chances of him failing to Genjutsu are pretty low. The question is whether Minato even bothers setting up all these safety measures when he doesn't really know just how scary Itachi is with his Genjutsu. Despite being Itachi's ace in the whole techniques, these won't actually be as significant in this matchup. Tsukuyomi is outright unnecessary as Sharingan Genjutsu should be good enough as covered previously, so we're left with just Amaterasu and Susanoo. I should mention that Koto Amatsukami is restricted as Itachi obviously wins with that since it doesn't even need eye contact and does seem pretty much unbreakable, so there's that. Anyhow, Itachi's fastest Susanoo attack feat is landing Totsuka on Nagato. The thing is, even this feat isn't really super clean. Kabuto outright blames this on Nagato's lack of mobility and the absence of shared vision, so apparently if Nagato had seen it coming and could move, he would be fine there. Nagato's best reaction feat is reacting to Amaterasu, so Minato has him beat there by being faster than V2 for Raikage. And with Hiraishin, he can dodge anything instantly as long as he can react. So Susanoo attacks therefore probably won't be landing here whatsoever. If anything, manifesting Susanoo could actually backfire on Itachi due to the linking mechanics of Hiraishin that I covered in its section. The irony here is though that Itachi actually has to keep his Susanoo active at basically all times, not only because there will be a constant threat of Minato teleporting somewhere nearby with Rasengan, but there's actually another scary technique that's in Minato's back pocket and could be pulled out at any point, and that's Food Cart Destroyer. Minato's feat with it is frankly kinda crazy. It knocked Kurama down and that's full Kurama we're speaking about, Kurama before he gets split into his two halves. So the lower versions such as Ribcage or V1 Susanoo definitely won't cut it here, and even with V2 Susanoo, it might not leave Itachi uninjured. So yeah, this is actually one of Minato's win cons. Itachi doesn't know about the danger of Food Card Destroyer, and Gamma Bunta might just squash him into the ground instantly at any point. But even if he's lucky enough to keep Susanoo around at all times, not only does it allow Minato to surprise teleport him into an attack, but it will also be constantly draining his stamina, which in turn slows down his reaction speed, as Sasuke explained against Deidara, which progressively puts him into a worse and worse position against a speedster like Minato. So this is just a lose-lose situation no matter how you look at it. When it comes to Amaterasu, it seems like sensors can notice a chakra buildup in the eyes when Amaterasu is about to be used, which would in theory allow Minato to preemptively leave Itachi's line of sight when he senses that Amaterasu is about to be used. Now obviously the first time Itachi goes on to use Amaterasu, Minato won't even know what's about to happen. But after this first time, Minato can start relying on this method to keep track of when Amaterasu is about to be used. Hiraishin actually allows Minato to deal with Amaterasu even if he's hit by it. Minato can simply teleport away, leaving the flames behind. We've actually seen him doing this already once when he was hit by the Anton Rasen Shuriken combo and he just leaves it behind. So that's a pretty straightforward counter there. Ultimately, both Susanoo and Amaterasu aren't really the game changers that they usually are, and Sharingan Genjutsu, clones, and crows are actually the biggest threats to Minato in this fight. So now that we are almost at the end, if I had to say who's the likely winner here, I would say Minato wins at least like 60 to 70 times out of 100 matches. Minato's win conditions being either blitzing Itachi with kunai or Rasengan once he manages to get his formula through a kunai or a clone nearby Itachi, or he blitzes Itachi once Itachi is teleported out of Susanoo right into Rasengan or something like that. Then there's always the Food Card Destroyer strategy. Another option is also just outlasting Itachi, as he will need his Mangekyo, which drains him and that slows him down, and eventually Minato will have an upper hand that's high enough. On the other hand, Itachi's best chances come from Genjutsu. I actually think Minato outright loses to Genjutsu unless he takes both the necessary precautions I talked about, shadow clones and avoiding eye contact. So if you think Minato won't think of either of those, Itachi might as well just win the majority. The reason why I'm going with Minato having 60 or 70% chance of winning is because he at least has multiple win conditions, while Itachi's win conditions mainly rest on this, as his other win condition is essentially just setting up a clone feint and perfectly capitalizing on the opportunity by landing a finisher before Minato can teleport away. Now if you really want to glaze Itachi super hard and gamble it all on his soul reading ability that allows him to predict his opponent's move, maybe he could also pull off countering Hiraishin in some similar fashion to Killer Bee once in a while, but I wouldn't bank on it. Here I just want to quickly go over how things change or don't change if it's Edo Tensei, Itachi or Minato on one side or the other. Contrary to popular belief, I don't really think Itachi's chances change much if he's in Edo Tensei form. Like, at first glance it does look like Itachi being Edo Tensei should change a lot. Itachi experiences intense physical repercussions from using the Mangekyo Sharingan, such as stopping in agony, clutching his face, or even collapsing and coughing up blood. When facing a speedster and teleporter like Minato, even a brief moment of vulnerability could prove fatal. The fact that Itachi's chakra is constantly being replenished means he can just keep using Susanoo all the time, and it also seems like Itachi's Mangekyo is low-key eternal Mangekyo while he's Edo Tensei, as he doesn't seem to be going blind although he's spamming his Mangekyo pretty hard in War Arc. All of these differences make it sound pretty insane, but I genuinely believe that if Itachi is going to win, it's gonna be fast anyways. Like I said before, his best win con is still just Genjutsu, and either Minato underestimates Itachi's Genjutsu prowess and doesn't take the precautions, in which case Minato just loses, or Minato does actually do his due diligence, Genjutsu ceases being a serious threat and Itachi just gets teleported out of Susanoo and Rasengan. The only way Edo Itachi is actually winning here is if you don't believe that Minato can teleport people out of Susanoo, in which case Edo Itachi can just spam Amaterasu across the entire battlefield, which would limit Minato's mobility as he would just not be able to teleport around anymore, and eventually Itachi would corner Minato and kill him with his Susanoo. So for people who believe those are the limits of Hiraishin, I can see Itachi being Edo Tensei playing a much bigger role. As for Edo Tensei Minato, if Minato is only allowed to use his Kurama Chakra mode version 1, it does somewhat shake things up already. Yes, Minato's speed will obviously go up, but it still doesn't allow him to move faster than he can through Hiraishin anyways, as he still relies on Hiraishin for his high speed combos even while in KCM 1. The mode will also increase his physical speed in general, allowing him to land his attack even faster after he teleports near his target, so this does raise his overall chances of finishing Itachi off when he gets the opportunity. The biggest game changer here by far would be if one believes that Minato can use Mini-tailed Beast Ball whilst in KCM 1. Naruto has shown the ability to do so, and since making it seems to be pretty simple as long as you know the black and white chakra ratio, it stands to reason that Minato could pull it off. According to Databook 4, its AP is actually on par with regular tailed Beast Ball, so a hit from it would most likely just eradicate Itachi. Itachi's V4 Susanoo and Yata Mirror don't have any feats of tanking attacks on those levels, but even if you wanna wank Itachi's Yata Mirror and just assume it can withstand the attack, since even Saitama and Galactus couldn't defeat Itachi, Minato can still just direct the mini-tailed Beast Ball at a part of Susanoo that's not being guarded by the shield and nuke it regardless. If Minato is allowed to go into KCM 2, then this just becomes a stomp. Minato now has a Kurama to break him out of any Genjutsu, so there go Itachi's win conditions outside of Tsukuyomi. Minato also can just fire several tailed beast balls which just kill Itachi instantly, so yeah, it's not even fair. Well, there you have it. I'm not actually even that sure how controversial my take is. Anyways, definitely let me know in the comments what you liked about the video or what you didn't like, so I know what to improve on in my future videos. And see you in the next one. See ya!